On Friday afternoon, I had the chance to see Spider-Man Brand New Day, and I think we gotta talk about it. Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Goose. Welcome back to Goose's Crackpot Theories. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you like nerdy stuff, like talking about superhero movies, doing trailer breakdowns and things like that, then feel free to shoot me a sub, and you'll get to see new videos the second they come out. In addition, I do have 2 other channels you can check out while you're here, and if you like that content, then please feel free to subscribe to them as well. So I keep going back and forth on Spider-Man Brand New Day, and warning just from here on out that there will be spoilers herein. I'm not going to move them to some other section of the video because I kind of want to jump around a little bit. Before we get started, 2 things. 1, this video is going to be a bit more off the cuff than my last one. I didn't like how boring I sounded, how stilted my chat was, and so I don't really want to read from a script this time. I'm just going to kind of look at some bullet points and then give you a little bit more of the raw Goose flavor. If you prefer a method with more information, if you prefer more scripted videos, then please let me know in the comments. I'm flexible, but I think this is more entertaining. The second thing is, I have 3 kind of very loose constraints when it comes to what can ruin a movie for me, and they're very obvious. I think they're very widely appealing to most people when it comes to their interests in films, but I think that I can put it into words so that people can understand a little easier. So here goes. Number 1, I don't believe that the fees that we pay celebrities are helpful for movie productions. I think that paying $85 million for RDJ to come back just for the name recognition alone is quite expensive, and I think that they could have used that $85 million for anything else. Bring in a no-name actor for Dr. Doom and just rely on your casting directors and your talent coaches to bring them up to snuff, and if not, then fire him and get somebody else. This could easily have been done for so much less money, and you could have spent the rest on just production details, but Doomsday isn't out yet, so we don't know how that movie's going to shake out. But again, when you have a high price for actors, you then have a higher price to meet for investors and for your producers and things like that. So it can hurt a production in ways that can as of yet be unforeseen, but significant. The second thing that I tend to gripe on is the fact that the directors and creatives of all types, like even makeup artists, hairstylists, they all have their own creative vision. And the problem is that it may not be entirely cohesive as a production would be when they're completely vertically integrated. And I don't mean this in a business term. Vertically integrated is when you own all of your means, when you own, like, the way, if you make milkshakes, you own the farm that has the cows that you harvest for the milk, you own the facilities that make the milkshake. You own everything, every single step in the operation. That's not what I mean when I say vertically integrated. What I mean when I say vertically integrated is that they're all following the same game plan. They're all following the exact same blueprint. They're all on the same page. They're all just little clones of you as the production director. They're all just like little tiny, like specific versions of you carrying out your exact dream, your exact vision, exactly the way that it's stated. The problem is that that's not how a lot of MCU productions run. Like, they're collaborative efforts, and I love that. I love the fact that we are allowing for people to have voices in the industry that wouldn't otherwise have had those voices if these stricter guidelines were put into place. That being said, I think that just taking a comic and putting those panels on the screen is honestly the best way to honor the medium. And the third thing is even smaller than the other 2 things, and it's even tied to actors making too much money. It's really just the overall cost for things in the first place. I think that people just kind of like sign the order slips and they sign the purchase orders without like trying to negotiate lower prices. And me being a businessman, like I really would like to see better quality productions. Like, in what good business people do is you take a product and you try to make it the best that you can. You use the best materials, you use the absolute top quality, and then you take that price and you try to mark it up a fair amount so that the person who's paying it doesn't feel gouged, and then you try to tell the story of that product enough so that they can understand why it costs the thing it does, and then you just charge what it costs. You charge what it costs with a little bit to help you with your labor costs and in order to maintain your standard of life. But it's, and again, it's such a small thing, but I think that paying attention to production costs is what's going to help us be more smart in the future and make productions more affordable, especially when you're trying to tap younger creators and lesser known creators like people from YouTube in order to make your movies. You're saving money there already. It really makes sense to try and cut costs everywhere else along the production so that things can stop being hundreds of millions of dollars and then needing to make hundreds of millions of dollars. So those are my 3 things. I'm only saying them. I'm not saying that that's any of that has happened in this movie, any of that has happened in Brand New Day at all. I'm just saying those just so that you know where my gripes are coming from if I say something that seems a little obscure or like why is he upset about that. So Spider-Man starts out pretty normally. We see a little bit of a montage of the things that he's been up to in his time as Spidey since we last saw him. It's all the same details that you've seen in trailers. It's all the same details you've seen in all the different movie breakdowns. Really just kind of rote stuff. It's really just to get people back into knowing who Spider-Man is and knowing what he's been up to. This is sort of the problem because you've placed now all of your villains in the very beginning of the movie that have anything to do with Spider-Man. Metzger doesn't have anything to do with Spider-Man. Jean Grey doesn't have anything to do with Spider-Man. All of them have definitely seen each other before, but they're not involved in each other's stories. So it starts out with Peter doing crime fighting, and he talks to this person, DeWolf, who is, I guess, chief of police, a high-ranking official, detective, something like that in the police force. And I don't understand where we're at in terms of the timeline, because this was supposed to be set just after Punisher One Last Kill, right? So wouldn't things be like in chaos still? Because we're talking like maybe about a year after the new Avengers have been introduced. New York is recently still reeling from an attack from the Void, who sent people to the fucking shadow dimension. Of course, since the new Avengers are sort of more public facing, then there's every chance that Val was able to convince the public that it was like a training exercise or that it was actually like something bad, but they were able to take care of it. Obviously, as per the end of the movie, when she was basically using them as a platform to launch the new Avengers, it kind of makes sense. But that could have been the montage. You see what I'm saying? Like, so catching us up on all the stuff that's happening in the surrounding environment would have been great as the montage, and then moving those villains further into the movie to actually have them have scenes with Spider-Man. And towards the end of this video, I'll discuss how I would have done things, but this is sort of how my timeline would have began. I would have said all of the montage stuff that we got, introduced DeWolf if you really feel like you have to, though I think Yuri Watanabe would have been great to have being his spider contact, I guess. Maybe Destin didn't want to go too close to the video games because she's one of the first people that you talk to in, I think, the first video game. So fine, whatever, but like, she's a great character and she turns into kind of like a super vigilante herself, so it's kind of a cool little like lead-in to other potential projects with Yuri herself. But so they introduced DeWolf, and she seems like a great character, obviously great actress, and she's a bit of a deep cut from, I think, the 80s, who occasionally helps Spider-Man, like kind of like the Commissioner Gordon role with Batman, sort of the guy in the chair, but not really, like your police contact, I guess. She didn't have kids with names, as far as I know, nor were they at all ever important, and so I have no idea really what significance the moment of him like say hi to EJ and whoever, the daughter's name for me, other than to demonstrate that he's grown and that he's become more of an adult Peter, which it feels like it's meant to be an Easter egg or a nod to something more significant, yet I don't think that it actually is. Maybe a sister to Rio or an aunt to Miles or something like that. Her being involved in the police force and Miles's dad also being involved in the police force, there's every chance that it could be something like that. But also, you know, we didn't get Uncle Ben in this version of Peter, or we didn't really get to know what his and Aunt May's life was when Ben was alive or before Iron Man kind of discovered him. So we didn't get to see his origin story, so we don't really know what their home life was like. We don't know what if the Miles origin is going to be sort of the same disjointed, like, hey, it's a new quirky thing sort of thing. There's every chance that could be it. But I think not having anything established, no nods to anything else except for the fact that this person's name is DeWolf, feels like a waste of the character, but we have yet to see. It's the first introduction, so we don't know if they're going to be in any other productions, anything smaller, any TV based or anything like that, and so it remains to be seen. It doesn't really matter for the whole ensemble or for the overall story of the film, but I want to know, you know, maybe that's not a gripe for the film overall, it's just my own personal, like, I want to know, I'm like curious. So he's solving crimes, and we established that he's done a lot in the last 4 years, and that Ned and MJ have moved on because they don't remember him, obviously. I think that this feels a little lifeless. This feels a little bit like a speed run through those 4 years, and I would have liked to have seen how he's, you know, more of his social interactions. You know what I mean? Like, we saw a little bit when that girl was like, "Oh, you live in my building," you know, kind of like the sort of parallel to the person that lived across from him when he was living by himself in Spider-Man in the Raimi-verse. But like, I want to see more of that. I want to see more Parker, you're never on time. The guy who was his manager in the second movie, you know, like I want to see more of that, and I don't feel like that we got enough of his slice of life to know sort of where he's at mentally. We just kind of see that he's stressed, and I guess that could be told through exposition, but I you know, show don't tell, right? This entire time he's like reading the letter, he's like you know, recapping how it feels to have to deal with all this stuff. He's Spider-Man, he's got to protect you, all that kind of stuff. Great, totally good to set all this up. So then we're introduced to the main story element, which starts as a stolen tank rampaging through downtown New York. This is the moment that we saw in the first trailer. We got to see, you know, a good portion of this scene where he's swinging after the tank and it fires at him and he's able to take out the gun. He takes out Punisher. Punisher tries to swear, but he's not allowed. It's a cool kid moment. Cool, everything like that. I love it. Good action. But when we get to like sort of the next part of the first trailer that I had speculated on endlessly, with when we see sort of the body hopping whatever consciousness, it was a little jarring when people had said that was Jean Grey, when the speculation started coming out. I was like, I don't know that Jean Grey has ever done personality or body hopping before. Like, I know that there are definitely telepaths in the Marvel universe who do body hopping, and it was never really Jean. I don't mind that they're going to tell this story the way that they want to here, but it feels like introducing this character, having her bundled with powers that don't make sense for her character is jarring. It's a little bit of a weird departure, and I don't think it's for the right reasons, unfortunately. The way that it's set up is just that, and I'm sorry again, spoilers, we're gonna go through spoilers because I'm gonna be jumping around. She's just introduced as just like a normal kid, like a normal person who has a sister who gets abducted, and like that's it. And I understand, like, we're trying to reboot this universe and we're trying to introduce the X-Men, but do that after Secret Wars. Like, you didn't need Jean Grey in this movie. You didn't need it. You had a whole movie with all the villains you shoved into the first 5 minutes of the movie. You had a whole movie with those guys. And the other problem with it is that it honestly feels like you make these characters, you develop the costumes or the CG or whatever to make them look nice and fancy and shiny, and then you don't do anything with them. Tombstone gets one line. He gets one line. It's insane. And he'd been hyped up for like this whole time. Oh man, like, he looks so cool. He's ready to go. He's ready to make his big debut. And people were speculating, oh man, he's gonna be like the final, he's the one who's actually behind everything. No, he's a throwaway. But so, like, you hire these people, you have to pay for their costuming, you have to pay for the body acting, or you have to pay for whatever. Even if they're all like entirely CG, you still gotta pay for the CG, and CG's more expensive than practical. And so you gotta pay for all these things and then just use them for like half a second each. It feels weird to me. And so that leads into kind of like my next point. It honestly feels like you're just taking a bunch of trailers and you're trying to make those into a movie, and I think it's a miss. I think that if you're not spending time developing the relationships between these characters, then why the fuck are you having the characters in the movie in the first place just as fodder? These are people who have had huge storylines with Spider-Man in the past. Like, I don't think that you're just introducing them to bring them into the universe, because Destin did the same thing with Shang-Chi. He introduced a whole bunch of shit. Like, the Dweller in Darkness is a fear lord. Like, he's the separated appendage of a fear. I say he's his decapitated head, but like, he's just a part of he's a splinter, like Billy and Tommy were splinters of Mephisto. The Dweller in Darkness is a splinter of another Despair, I believe. The fucking, like, that guy with the sword arm was a really well-known villain. You take all these guys that have all this story potential, and then you remove them from the story, from the potential story, and like, just to introduce an X-Man. And so, like, stringing trailers together looks great, and it feels good, kind of, I guess, but it doesn't feel good narratively. It feels like we're telling a really disjointed story, or that we're not really telling one story at all. We're trying to tell like 10 different stories, even though there was only like really a couple different plot lines. They weren't telling 10 stories. It really was just about Spider-Man's mutation and about Jean. This is a cool aspect of the movie that I will say is a +1 in the category for Spider-Man Brand New Day. I love that they're kind of rolling back his powers a little bit and then saying like, this new mutation is actually what makes Spider-Man into like the fully fledged Spider-Man that we've seen in the comics. That's kind of a cool explanation of like why his power scaling is a little different, though I think it was really strong when he stopped the Winter Soldier's punch and when he's able to lift an entire building off himself. But so like, when it comes to a thing feeling disjointed, it hurts more when you start making the rest of the movie more of an ensemble movie. So if it feels disjointed, if it feels like it's not a cohesive storyline, storyline, for the first part, like things are kind of just jumping around a lot. It feels like the video game, you know? It feels like you've got quests to complete. Most of that in storytelling fashion is fine, but when it comes to the end, when you've got Awkwafina shooting arrows into the Dweller of Darkness, it becomes less a movie about Shang-Chi or Spider-Man, and more a movie about the group, the cast overcoming the odds, the cast saving the world. As I said before, for movies where it's traditional, where the hero would have some help from an ensemble or a team of his secondary characters, then that's all well and good. But famously, Spider-Man kind of has to deal with things alone. That's kind of part of his character, is that he's just always sort of lonely. And they addressed that during this movie, but then they fixed it. Like, he's not supposed to cure his loneliness right away. You know, I know the Dan Slott run had a lot of ensemble characters, and he was which I believe was when Brand New Day happened in the comics. But like, you know, he was roommates with Boomerang. Like, that would have been really cool if this was a thing. You know, he doesn't. I don't approve of what you're doing. You're a vigilante and you're on the bad side of the law. But I actually don't think they knew. I don't think that Boomerang knew that Peter was Spider-Man until like near the end of their roommate tenure. I don't know. I didn't read a lot of Dan Slott's run. Like this, that was the ground level Peter. It was him fighting ground level villains. It was him developing a rogues gallery, not just having already established one in the last 4 years since we saw him. After the tank makes a nice big gaping hole in the damage control facility, we're introduced to Metzger, who is kind of a apparently good force who's out trying to help people, but we've seen in previous movies that the people who work for damage control are not good people. So I think most people kind of already knew that he was going to be kind of a bad guy. I think that the reasons why people were speculating that is because they thought that Jean was being held in that facility, which turns out that she wasn't, or that he was going to try to abduct Peter at some point, which he didn't. So obviously there was some elements of, okay, well, this guy's obviously evil, but like, I think they buried it a little bit. Okay, it's really obvious when it's revealed that he actually is bad. Like, it's just really obvious. He lied to me. Yeah, of course he did. He is incentivized to do so. Like, he would lose everything if he admitted that there was like some, you know, problem. If he admitted that there was some secret that he was keeping. But what this does is it introduces Metzger and it introduces Jean Grey, and the two characters have very little to do with Spider-Man's overall storylines, let alone Brand New Day itself, which I'm not expecting this to adhere to, by the way. I'm not expecting this to be just a faithful retelling of the storyline Brand New Day. I'm just thinking that it would have been a really good template to use to then branch off of. And so Spidey goes off and kind of just does, you know, whatever he thinks is his thing until the next time that we need him to engage with the main plot. He deals with his mutation a little bit, and MJ and Ned kind of reveal that they have moved back into town by having a kind of a housewarming party. I think Peter brings flowers for housewarming, but I don't think that it's officially a housewarming party. And this kind of comes to, like, I would say probably the biggest gripe that I would have with this movie is that we threw away this whole MJ plot. We threw away the whole thing. We're setting it up so that she's no longer going to be a love interest for Peter because, you know, and again, spoilers, by the end of the movie, almost nothing with them is resolved. She doesn't have her memories back, and he is not anything more to her than an associate or a friend. Though some people are saying that the end is debatable. And so the way that they kind of made this Peter moment is they introduce her boyfriend, and they have them all like canoodling, and it's like a hurtful moment for Peter, even though he knows that she doesn't remember him. And so he leaves and he gets super stressed out, and that's when he kind of like passes out and becomes entrapped in a cocoon, and that's when he gets his organic web shooters. All par for the course. We kind of were expecting that. It's what we saw in the theaters. And sorry, before this, as the body hopper was jumping mines, Spidey was chasing it. But an element that I forgot to mention was that it actually committed moida. It offed a guy, made him step out into traffic and just murk himself like right then and there. And that puts Jean Grey's body count at a solid 1 so far, which is, I guess, insane. I guess insane. Once you go to Charles's school for gifted youngsters, I think maybe then your no-kill policy is in place. But I feel like introducing Jean Grey as a murderer is a little off kilter, though we kind of have known who Jean Grey is for a while now. It's been, what, like 30 years almost since the initial X-Men came out, so we know that she's a good person. We know she's a hero, like movie-going audiences, you know what I mean? Like, not comic book audiences. We already kind of know all that shit. And she can have, like, dark streaks, and she can be Phoenix and, like, kill people that way, because then she's evil, but, like, introducing Jean Grey as a teenager, as someone who just makes a person walk out into traffic graphic is brutal. And maybe we're trying to go for a more brutal Jean Grey, but why? Why? It doesn't really make sense unless you go by this how I would have done things different, which again, we'll save that to the end. But this felt way more like an advertisement for X-Men than it did a Spider-Man film. Like, even just making her a refugee from a different universe that had already like been destroyed from incursions, that would have been a better story element than just introducing her as just some girl who got caught up in this bullshit. And then it would be like a callback to like Agatha all along, like how Billy and Tommy were able to move into bodies and become real people. Like that could have just been a thing that could have happened. But either way, it feels like making one of the most well-known and foundational X-Men team members and well-liked, I would say, into just some random girl who's angry that her sister was taken, and then like make her a moiterer. It just kind of gives existing fans the cold shoulder, since they've seen her be introduced for like 30 years now over and over again, and she's not a villain. So anyone who knows her character knows she'll be good by the end, right? She's like, it creates a sympathy for her, and it doesn't add anything to the reveal that she's a villain. It eliminates the actual antagonist, because then the antagonist becomes, oh, well, it's the society that put these measures into place that allowed for her sister to get abducted. Sometimes I just want a mustache twirling villain. Sometimes I just want some bad guy going, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, Green Goblin was great, and it would be great to have another sort of villain that just fucking ruins Peter's life, you know, like Brand New Day. If you guys knew how awesome Brand New Day could have been just by following the comic, then, like, you know, maybe y'all would feel the same way that I do about this. So it becomes society. It becomes like how we handle trauma, how we process trauma, how we deal with risks and danger and all this kind of stuff, and how we conduct ourselves when we know we can do something about, you know, something that we feel passionately about, and either choose to do nothing or do the right thing and try to protect the ones that we love. Those are all the story elements that I've come to know and respect about Destin's work, about Marvel's stuff, about Feige's work, about all that stuff that we've seen in the MCU. That's the stuff that I've come to respect. All of this processing of trauma, but we're leaning into it too hard. We're leaning too far into the, well, society is the villain, is sort of arc. And I don't mind that for like ensembles like the Avengers. It's great to have society as the villain, because then we can go punch up a bunch of different people. But when it comes to like just wanting a small intimate story for Spider-Man, it's gonna have to be a mustache twirling villain. You must pay the rent. And in terms of Tillman's character Metzger, I'm not sure that William Metzger ever really interacted with Spider-Man. Maybe during Civil War, but I think that is really just an X-Men guy. You know, he's like, he hates mutants. He doesn't like mutants. He's really only the villain for like the third act twist too, you know, and Spider-Man never actually has to defeat him. He also makes it out. Like, he also escapes. So super cool on that one, I guess. I don't think that he was memorable enough to be in anything else. I hope so, because it feels like a waste if not. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he goes to Bruce Banner, who is teaching at NYU or Empire State, don't remember. But so he's teaching, and Spider-Man comes up to him. Again, you really could have just made him go to that school. He could just have been going to that school in order to earn his degree, because when last we saw him, he was getting like GED qualification paperwork and stuff. A kid as smart as him could definitely have made it into either NYU or Empire State, whichever. He famously went to Empire State University, but you know, I think that's the fictional one, and NYU is like the real one. But so like he could have just been going there, and when Banner says, "You're not one of my students, are you?" It's clear that they're acknowledging that he could have just gone there. But so you know, they talk a little bit, and Peter somehow gets around to creating inhibitor tech from X-Men. You remember those collars that they put on all the mutants in Deadpool 2 when Cable and Deadpool were captured? Those apparently in the 616 have been created by Peter fucking Parker. He created the means by which mutants were subjugated in Days of Future Past. Insane! That's essentially like saying that Peter Parker helped create the Sentinels. Why is Peter Parker the vehicle through which we are now discovering the X-Men part of this universe? But so, obviously, Spider-Man has gotten in the way of this body-hopping telepath somehow, some way, in some form. And so now he's trying to figure out what's happening to him, and this voice confronts him as this body hopping entity in another body, talks to him about, you know, going to find MJ and all this kind of stuff. And so he panics. He's like, gotta try and like, we know Jean Grey's good. God damn it. But so they you know, he goes and tries to save MJ. He whisks her away, and all of a sudden, like, now she remembers him. Now she's like trying to get close to him, and then she kisses him, and like then she goes, it's obvious that it's a trick. It's really obvious. If you know what's happening, you know that she can jump into any body she wants, and that she's going to find MJ. She can travel way faster than Spider-Man. It only makes sense that they're going to be on that rooftop, and it's going to have been a trick. They want to do a rug pull moment. They want to do that whole thing. Of course, it's of course predictable, but still a good moment. Pretty brutal, pretty cold. But again, we know that Jean Grey's a good guy. Even in the, like, we know that in the moment, yeah, okay, she might be doing a monstrous thing, but she's a good guy. She's a hero. So why, they're never going to just make her an outright villain. She's not just going to be Dark Phoenix and then stay Dark Phoenix and never become anything other than Dark Phoenix. She's going to become Jean Grey at some point. It feels meaningless to, almost, not entirely. Like, I still like the movie. I feel like I'm just like talking endless shit, but I liked the movie. I liked it. If I was just to say, if someone was to ask me, like, just did you like the movie? I'd be like, yeah, it was a good movie. I just feel like there were some things that could have been done differently, and I feel like they were right there in front of our faces the entire time, and we really should just be listening to our fans. All the people who were speculating, all the people who were throwing theories out there that sounded better than what the actual story ended up being. I think a lot of us have seen the people's opinions online about what they were expecting, and not delivering on that as long as the movie's good is fine, but like, man, it could have been good. It could have been better. You know, it was good, but it could have been great. It was amazing, but it could have been spectacular. I'm trying to use the words that they used for like Spider-Man. Not the great Spider-Man, but the spectacular Spider-Man. And so like he has this moment with MJ that we think is a heartfelt, touching moment where she finally remembers him. It's a rug pull moment. So they go to Frank's because obviously Jean is willing to jump into MJ's body, and that's a bad thing because she could make her hurt herself, as we've already seen in the previous scene. And so, understandably, Peter's freaked out, and he goes off and he tries to figure out what's happening in terms of Jean and why she's doing what she's doing. I don't remember at which part this section I'm about to mention was. I think it was probably when he first met Tillman, but he's in the facility. He was taken on a tour of the facility, and we saw all of that sort of like tech that they'd been collecting over the years and clearly experimenting on and trying to make other things with, including the Shocker Gauntlet that we saw in the trailers. Now, I had speculated that this would be where we meet the Jackal, or where we get an indication that the Jackal is sort of the guy behind the scenes. And in my version of this, the one that I would have made, the villains at the end who make up Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, who would have been plaguing him through the entire movie, they then each adopt like one of those sort of things. Like, so one of them has Vulture's wings, one of them has Shocker's gauntlet, one of them has a Chitauri weapon. Like they each get sort of an upgrade and then try to use those to defeat Spider-Man. But they didn't make my version of it. So so what we got was we got sort of the lead in, we got an understanding of what Metzger's up to and just kind of like what's going on at Damage Control. He's also reformed, quote unquote, the Hand members, which I think actually was kind of just a thing. It feels like they were villainous, which was sort of, I think that's kind of what people were expecting. But he introduces them as kind of good, like he's reformed them, he's shown them that there's a different way. But by the end, they're kind of just his bodyguards. So I feel like, they never really changed. Or they were changed, maybe being like, just conditioned by him or something like that. Or they were just being funded. I don't know. But the Hands there feel like completely useless, unnecessary to have the Hand. You really could have just had two of his Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery guys. So I guess maybe this is a good time to start talking about how I would have done things. So the overall story from how I would have done things if I had had the chance to just go bonkers and make my Spider-Man movie that was based on Brand New Day, it would be essentially, it would start with him in a fight with a criminal, and it would just keep going from like fight moment to, oh, he's figuring out that he's mutating, to other fight moment to, oh my gosh, this mutation actually makes me stronger, to other fight moment where he's like, oh my god, it actually like makes me kind of insane, and so I'm going overboard, and he almost like kills the guy or kills a cop or something like that. Then then we see like, you know, we get the whole tank thing and the whole introduction to Metzger. We get the introduction to sort of like the breadcrumbs for Jackal, and we get the introduction to all these weapons being held by Damage Control, and Spider-Man then like defeats sort of the last guy for this one right before we get like more evidence for the Brain Hopper. And so like all of this stuff is happening through Act 1. So his rogues gallery, he's fighting Scorpion gets taken into custody, he's fighting Boomerang gets taken into custody, he's fighting Tarantula gets taken into custody, he's fighting, you know, all these other guys, not Tombstone yet. And so all of this stuff happens, and he tries to figure out what's going on with his mutation. He understands that Jean, like that there's not Jean, but that there's a Brain Hopper happening. And so then he's like trying to figure out what's going on with that. And then we get these like little sort of B plot elements like behind the scenes. Metzger is doing his like, you know, gears turning kind of shit. He's experimenting, he's like trying to talk to the criminals, and we see him kind of like acting nice and like trying to be like a reformer as opposed to a punisher. But later on, like in sort of like at the end of a scene, we see him walking into a room where there's like a guy on a hospital bed, and Jean Grey is like sitting there. We don't know who she is yet in my version. Just a teenage girl with red hair is sitting there, and she looks like upset or distressed or whatever. And Metzger then sits down, and we see him kind of like collapse, like how people do when she leaves their brain. And then we see the guy in the bed, who's played by Keith David in my version, kind of go like, oh, like he's received the brain. And then he says again to her, he goes like, thank you, or something like that. And she's like, okay, can I go now? And then like he's like, yeah, you know, but remember that, you know, you can't, there's no escape or whatever. And so we find out now that Keith David has been having Jean Grey transfer his mind into Metzger's body, and that Metzger is just an empty shell. And so and the suggestion would be that Keith David is playing the Jackal, and he has Jean Grey captured and is manipulating her to move his consciousness from his dying withered body to this young body, which would have been a real fucking plot twist, let me tell you. However, in the movie as it is in the theaters, Keith David only plays a voice on a documentary, which I believe was a little sad and wasted, just to levy my own opinion. For that matter, Scorpion was also wasted. We only saw him a couple times in the movie, and we kind of got to see a little bit of a punch up, but it was really just him being controlled by Jean, and then the first one was just like him being defeated by Spider-Man. It was very quick, didn't really make me feel like it was a fight scene. I feel like fight scenes in movies should seem like boss fights in video games. You know what I mean? Like they should be drawn out, they should be intense, and there should be a lot of like cool angles and cool like, you know, animations and like all kind, like, you know, like the kung fu movies of old, that kind of thing, like really well choreographed, really well like complemented by graphics and practical design and all this kind of stuff. But we got very little punch up, we got very little physical action in those scenes, and I feel like that means that Scorpion was a little wasted, honestly. Michael Mando is super good at what he does, and it really felt like he could be Mac Gargan. Like that's like his persona, like incorporating a little bit of Voss, but more like just organized crime, like type, like technological kind of guy. Like he's just like, yeah, I'm Mac Gargan, you know, I'm gonna be Venom someday. But so once he's able to get, you know, some idea of what Jean might be after, or at least what her motivations might be, he doesn't know what she's after until a bit later on. He goes back and finds out that MJ has read the letter, the infamous letter. And this was probably one of the biggest fumbles of the movie. I don't think we really needed a resolution to the letter. I think that he needed to like take the letter and reread it like maybe one final time before he confronted MJ and Ned, and then tossed it, and then just like said exactly what was on his mind, and it would have been way better than the letter. Obviously that didn't happen, and we get this really awkward exchange between the two where it's basically like MJ being MJ, talking about how like that wasn't your choice, like you shouldn't have decided for me, all this kind of stuff, and then just kind of like dropping the bomb that she just doesn't have any memories of him, and that she's like just not in love with him or whatever. And I know that it's supposed to set up a more will they won't they kind of thing than like a oh holy shit that's gut wrenching kind of thing, but it really just feels gut wrenching. It really just feels like it's her trying to exit the dynamic, you know what I mean? And I mean that in like a production sense, I don't mean that in a character sense. Like it feels like that Destin was more like this needs to feel final, and I guess I don't feel that towards the end, especially because the end is sort of like debatable whether or not you can remember somebody after magically forgetting them. But it feels too much like oh my god, like oh that's really like fucked up if he was gonna still still try to like get with her, you know? Like I don't think that would be like that's like a red flag kind of thing, you know? It's like a toxic masculinity sort of thing. Like, oh well, she says no, but I'm gonna pursue her anyway. It's a bad look. And then so she reads the letter and it kind of ruins the moment, but then he gets to hang out with Ned, which is really cool. And I thought that they were going to do the handshake thing then, but they didn't. They waited until the very end of it. And then I'm not entirely sure where the story goes, but at some point Damage Control is being attacked again and Hulk is involved. It's Smart Hulk until he rejects Jean Grey and turns into Hulk, which I guess, you know, Savage Hulk, not really Savage Hulk. Hulk is just kind of Hulk, you know, like you got Dr. Banner, you got the in-between, smart Hulk, and then you just got Hulk. And I think that the character development for the Hulk since Ragnarok really has been that Hulk is more or less sentient, though I would assume that Banner needing inhibitor tech in order to keep Hulk at bay would mean that at some point Hulk went out of control, but we didn't really get an answer to that. We didn't get a reason why he wanted to suppress the Hulk personality, because in Ragnarok, when he was Hulk was fine. Hulk was like, he understood his role in the Avengers. He understood like his own, like who he was. And then he got scared because Thanos beat the ever-living snot out of him. So, I mean, like the Hulk persona was traumatized, but he wasn't reverting back to like feral, savage Hulk territory. He was completely fine. He wasn't sentient per se, but he was at least able to talk, at least able to communicate. Angry girl, you know? Hulk, best Avenger. Thor, puny, weak Avenger. Hulk like big raging fire. You know what I mean? So like I that feels like a step backward, I guess, but he hasn't had his own solo project, so I mean, I guess there's no reason to really keep any kind of like continuity with him in terms of his character development. You can just kind of like fit the Hulk where you need to, but again, why was he in this movie? What's the point of this? Spider-Man's mutation has nothing to do with gamma radiation. I mean, maybe I think in the MCU it kind of does, because it's rumored to be that whatever the spiders were being worked on, that they were bombarded with gamma radiation, that's how they became radioactive. But man, like we just don't need Hulk in the movie. You had villains that you had in the first 5 minutes who could have taken the place of Hulk, who could have been mind-hopped, possessed, or whatever, and then you decided not to use them, just so you could put fucking Mark Ruffalo in your movie. But so in my version of this movie, when we you know, are in this sort of middle scene where we're finally establishing what the characters' motives are, or what the villains' motives are, and what they're willing to do in order to get it, it really could have just been an ensemble punch-up between like the mind-controlled villains, and by the end of the movie, like the third and final punch-up would have been like Tombstone finally revealing himself that he was actually the one bankrolling everything, and that he was the one who introduced the Jackal to Jean, and he was the one that, you know, led the Jackal to abducting Jean, using her sister as leverage, all this kind of stuff. And then it could have just followed the storyline where it reveals that Jean's sister is now dead, and it was because of experimentation. They're going to use Jean's brainwaves to make, you know, people freeze all over the place, I guess, or they're going to use Jean's brainwaves to, you know, manipulate minds everywhere, and that's kind of what DODC is wanting to do. They want to just like hijack people's brains who have powers so that they can like control them easier. Though Pete has kind of given them a bit of a leg up by introducing fucking inhibitor tech. But so yeah, in my version, it would be they all kind of team up. The Hand is considered one entity in my mind here. But so you get kind of a loose organization, or kind of like a sort of wannabe Sinister Six here, with Tarantula, Scorpion, Boomerang, Tombstone, and the Hand. And then he would defeat them again, right? They would simply be mind controlled by Jean at this point. And so he would defeat them, put the inhibitor on Jean, and she would be captured. He would then go on to find out that Metzger was lying, and then he would have to like help Jean. And what he would do is Metzger would be controlling her with the inhibitor, because the way that Pete describes it in the beginning of the movie is that you can kind of just do whatever you want to with the inhibitor. You can shut off and turn on powers as you want. And so they would have manipulated it, just like they did in the movie, to do something different with her powers. So in my version, it would be that they're allowing her to use powers only when they choose to, when it comes to like swapping brains with people anywhere around New York, anywhere within a radius. So she would have been used to create a shockwave that would have, you know, isolated people with powers, freezing them in place and kind of like outing them, I guess. And in the final battle, Spidey would be taking the fight to Tombstone Tombstone, having revealed to the other villains after beating them for, I guess, a third time, that it was Tombstone who was behind all of this and behind all of their captures ultimately as well, and they would then turn against Tombstone, forming a bit of a tentative alliance with Spider-Man. Jean would be the only one who would stay good at the end, but the rest of them would kind of go off and do their own thing. But it would be kind of like a friend of enemy if my enemy is my friend kind of thing. And I certainly wouldn't have had Jean murder anybody throughout the rest of the movie. And really, honestly, it would have felt better for this movie in general, just the way that things were, if they had moved that Jean stuff up to the beginning to like introduce her and her sister, and then like that would be, because I don't mind the way that they kind of did that, but shoving it at the end of the movie, it feels like the unnecessary exposition dump. It feels like this sort of, we're adding a scene because we thought test audiences wouldn't understand Jean's motivations. And I think that's a thing that deserved to be the intro for the movie, the cold open, you know? It was good. It was a good scene. You know, I think it really painted a lot of why Jean does what she does. And I understand that it would have been like an early reveal, but fuck, man, like everybody knew who Sadie was playing at this point. Everybody knew. So you don't really need to hide it at that point. And then in the movie that we all watched, Spider-Man has to confront the idea that he has been believing someone who was lying to him this entire time, and he then has to go and try and help Jean. And he then just talks her down. He talks her down, and she's not evil anymore, right before she's about to kill the bad guy. And then, so Spidey doesn't even have a dust-up with anyone other than the Hand. The Hand, these 4 random members of a team that we saw in a Daredevil Netflix series, are now somehow his final boss. I mean, the final boss was Trauma, as it always is, but I wanted a mustache-twirling villain, and we got the Hand. And then he did his, you get a web, and you get a web, and you get a web, and that's it. And so he defeats the Hand, he defeats Jean, I guess, he defeats Metzger, but he gets away, and now the DODC has inhibitor tech. So we set up other stuff, but we didn't really tell a Spider-Man story that I know of. And towards the end of the movie, Spider-Man goes to get more flowers for May's grave, and then encounters Ned randomly, and introduces himself again, and does exactly what I claimed was going to be like, you know, was going to be the thing that gets Ned to remember Pete. The secret handshake that they'd been doing since they were but wee babes. And it was a wonderful moment. And then at the very end, he goes, Peter! And so either, I've seen many different interpretations of what that could have meant. It could either have meant that his memories are just coming back and like they all flooded back and he's finally able to remember who Peter is. Or he just is tying all this together from when he realized that Spider-Man's first name is Peter. And he's just saying that, oh, I recognize that you're Spider-Man. Or it could just have been that, you know, Jean was able to reimplant the memories or take Pete's memories of them and put them into their heads or something like that. There's all kinds of different possibilities. I think they left it ambiguous for a reason, simply because they wanted to be able to leave room for whatever solution the producers want for whatever project mentions it next, unfortunately. Now, as I said before, I did not hate this movie. I liked this movie. I feel like I'm picking it apart here. And honestly, I didn't, even though it seems like there were some issues that I had with it, they didn't really affect my overall enjoyment of it. I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man is my ultimate favorite hero. I think that he's an inspiration for both adults and kids, and I think that he takes on both light and dark stories really well, and he's able to persevere through just the worst circumstances, and I think he's a great hero and a great storyteller and a great example for heroism. And so the movie was good. I I feel like I'm finding things to dislike in movies nowadays, and I don't think that that's a symptom of just wanting to commentate on it, but like I do notice these small things, and they do kind of like, they do gnaw at me, and maybe I'm the only one who feels the way that I do, but if you feel the same, then please feel free to share your take in the comments. But if I was to sum it all up, I would say that this really felt more like a advertisement and an introduction to one of the most well-known X-Men in existence, and therefore kind of felt a little like unnecessary. It made Spider-Man, it made this Spider-Man story feel less necessary, less central, less of a grounded Spider-Man story, and more of a look at the stuff that we're going to be showing you here pretty soon. Here's a look at some of the things you might see in the future. And we've seen this rodeo. We've seen, I mean, you've heard the articles about Wonder Man being canceled, you know. I think this whole like drama with Blade and and the blowback over the Eternals movie, all of this stuff throws wrenches, unnecessary wrenches, which ties back to my main point number 2, where I don't like that, you know, we're always trying to do what our own vision says. We should just be doing what the comic books say. But like, I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is that they try to save these characters for other things. Like Wonder Man, I guarantee you they're like, oh, well, we wanted to cancel the show so that he's available for future projects. But we saw the same thing with Blade, and we saw the same thing with the Young Avengers, Kate Bishop, many different characters in the MCU have been slated for future projects that ended up getting canceled or are being held for different things. Like the Hulk. The Hulk has been in perpetual hold. Like, oh, we want to save him for something really special. For what, 16 years? 20 years? A billion years at this point? Like, when's he gonna get his own movie? And like, you know, Namor was introduced, and he's one of the most like cool characters and central to many of the different plots that we've seen, and he's just nowhere to be found. Like, he's not anywhere. Like, he was central to Time Runs Out, and he was a pretty big part of Secret Wars, and so like I feel like he should be around. I feel like he should be here. So I guess that's probably it for the thoughts that I had about Brand New Day. I overall enjoyed it. It was a fun story. It was a fun Spider-Man story, but it felt less of a Spider-Man story than it did an introduction to Jean Grey and the X-Men and an advertisement for those characters, which had to happen at some point, but I'm sad that they did that to my boy Spidey, and I think that having a more centrally grounded story with the Rogues Gallery that we, you know, have all known for this entire time and expected to see, I think that, you know, it feels like a bit of a misstep, though I don't think that my opinion is going to be the more popular one. I think most people are probably just going to love this film, and it's going to be the one of their favorite Spider-Man films going forward. So, you know, I hope that's the case, and I hope that it helps, that the revenue from this movie helps to fund bigger and better Spidey projects. I want to see him on the screen again, and I hope that Tom Holland continues to play him, because he does a really good Spider-Man. And I think, you know, second only to his performance against Tobey and Andrew. I think he's on the screen. He is the best Spider-Man that I see, and I think that's a tall claim. I think that, you know, both Tobey and Andrew would be upset about that. But anywho, if you thought that this was a useful or entertaining commentary, then please drop a like, please drop a subscribe, and I don't know that you can drop a subscribe, but please subscribe and stay tuned for more. I've got another Tales from the Movie shelf coming here pretty soon. I've got another movie that I'm going to talk about called The Garden of Love. So get ready for that one. If you like schlocky horror movies, then get ready, because we're going to be doing a lot of these. It was a fun experience, and I really hope to do more, and that's going to be really entertaining and fun for us. So please stay tuned, hang out, and chill with the Goose Man. And yeah, that's about all I got for you today. Thank you for hanging out, and thank you for listening to this old man rattle off about one of his favorite superheroes. I really hope that I get to see you again, partner. Until then, I've been Goose. Go drink some water and hug a loved one, and remember that you matter, okay? Because you do. All right, there's going to be another day. It's always going to be the sun's going to rise again until the entropic death of the universe. So enjoy it while it lasts. It could be a few billion years at this point. So bye-bye.